Hi, everyone. This is Kevin Perez Verdia. Is Crystal Kennedy on yet?
I don't see her yet.
All right, and it is scheduled to start at 11 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, let's just give her a couple more minutes. I'll send her a text to see if she's just running behind. All right, well, it looks like it's already 6 after, so let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'm calling to order the meeting of the Assembly Public Safety Committee. It is January 6th at 11:07 a.m. And let's start with a roll call, please.
Ms. Kennedy? Mr. Perez Verdia?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Zalatel?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Allard? Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I did want to make one addition to the agenda, and I don't know if I necessarily need a motion to do that. Maybe others can share with me. We would like to add prior to old business, after the presentation of the U.S. Department of Justice briefing on the Murdered and Missing Indigenous People Project, after that item, we'd like to add a discussion on Anchorage Police Department technology/body cameras. We're going to have a brief conversation around that, and it looks like Crystal is here. And so let's go ahead and get started. We've still... Say that again.
My deepest apologies. I totally was not watching the clock, so I apologize profusely.
No worries. Well, if I can hand the meeting back over to you. We're just we've done the introductions, and we're on APD regular updates.
Well, go ahead, Cameron. Go ahead. You're doing fine, and yeah, we'll just do the regular updates, and then we'll get to our presentation. So, thank you.
Great. So if there's is there any objection to adding an item after item 6 to have a brief discussion on APD technology/body cams? Is there any objection from the body? Okay, hearing none, let's add that to the agenda, and then let's get started. Would a representative from APD like to start with any updates you'd like to share to the committee?
Hey, thanks. This is Justin. I know that there's a lot on the agenda today, so I'll be very brief. We talked in sort of the pre-meeting a little bit. I don't have any major updates from APD. We should next month have sort of our summary statistics for the fourth and final quarter of 2020, and we can talk about what that looks like then. But otherwise, I think things are ticking over pretty normally here, so I will leave it at that.
Great. And just as a reminder to the body, if you do have questions, please put yourself in the queue. It doesn't look like we have any questions for you, Chief. So let's move on to an update from the Anchorage Fire Department.
Good morning, everyone. Jody Hetrick with Anchorage Fire Department. I will also keep my update brief. We have secured the old Station 2 in Government Hill as the probable headquarters for our mobile crisis response team. We have position descriptions in classification for approval, and we're continuing to move forward with our organization of our mobile crisis team. So again, thanks everyone for your support, and we're progressing fairly quickly to get that up and running. The other thing I wanted to touch on slightly is we started our second round of COVID-19 vaccinations. Those all seem to be going well. I will report that we are at about 75.5% vaccination rate for the department, which is really good considering the concerns that people seem to have across the nation about the vaccine. So our people have felt informed and felt confident in the vaccine, so are getting it. Our number will probably go up with as more people, we had some people off, we've had some people who've had COVID, so we have some delays in people who will get the vaccine, so we'll continue to see those numbers climb. And we're on our second round. We should, by the middle of next week, the majority of our people will have their second round of the COVID vaccine. That does not mean that we're relaxing any of our PPE measures or anything. It just means that we are less likely to have our people get sick if they do get COVID. So again, thank you. And if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Great. Thank you for your update. I don't see any questions in the queue at this time. So let's move on. Do we have an update from the law department?
Yes, this is Sarah Stanley with the prosecutor's office. We are excitedly entering this new year, 2021. We're entering it with a lot of cases left over from 1919 and 2020. So we are working hard here in the office to get out offers and get those cases moving. Trials are still held off right now until March, but we are trying to get keep things moving as best we can, as if trials were still going on. So closer to March, I'll have an update for the committee on the plans there with the court system. That's all I have.
All right, super. Those were all really short and sweet. That's great. And I still don't see any questions or comments in the queue. So we're moving right along. Okay, and so, all right, so let's move on to the main topic for our meeting today. And I'll let her introduce herself. But we have a presentation of the U.S. Department of Justice briefing on Murdered and Indigenous People Project. And so if you'd like to, Ingrid, if you'd like to go ahead and jump right in. And are you going to share a presentation? I'm wondering if that's already been set up. Do you have a PowerPoint you're going to share?
I actually asked your staff to share it. It's just a brief outline. So I'm hoping it's being shared on your end, but if not, we'll do it orally and that will be fine too. Thank you so much, Ong. Hello. I want to introduce United States Attorney Brian Schroeder for the District of Alaska first to get us started, and that'll be on slide 2. Thank you.
Yeah, look, it looks like we've got the slideshow up, so if you could just give them direction of where you want to go, then go for it.
Yes, let's go to slide 2, and Mr. Schroeder, please.
And this is Crystal. Just as a reminder, if you're on the phone, You'll have to hit *6 to unmute yourself. Thanks.
Hi, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Brian Schroeder. I'm the U.S. Attorney for the District of Alaska. And I want to thank the chairs and thank the Assembly and the committee for the invitation to speak to you today. We start off paying respect to the Dena'ina people whose land we all live on here. And we always like to do that at the start of these discussions. We're here to discuss the Department of Justice's work along with our partners, and that's very important, on the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous persons. Now, I realize that different groups and different people use different phrases. Obviously, the first time many of us heard of this issue was under the idea of missing and murdered Indigenous women. The Department of Justice has chosen that particular term, though, murdered and missing Indigenous persons, because we want to examine not only missing women and girls of the Native community, but also all missing or murdered people. We want to include the whole group. And I think it's fitting that we speak to the Assembly's Public Safety Committee, because although we tend to think of this as a rural issue, as we all know in Alaska, so much of what happens in the rural areas, is touched upon in Anchorage. I mean, clearly one of the largest Native communities, maybe the largest, I understand, Native community in Alaska, Native population is here in Anchorage. And even the rural folks, when they come in, they spend time coming in and out of Anchorage. They shop, they visit, and it's a large economic driver for the city. So I think this is MMIP is an Anchorage issue too. It's not just rural, and I suspect you're going to hear that from our APD partners when they speak later. One thing I want to do, though, is give a little bit of context to how we got here. I'm a member of the Attorney General's Native American Issues Subcommittee. And about a year and a half ago, we looked out and saw there was a law called Savannah's Act that was in the legislative pipeline that we thought was going to be passed fairly soon by Congress. And we wanted to get out ahead of that. So we made some suggestions to Attorney General Barr on how we could do that. And a lot of you are aware that Attorney General Barr was very sensitive to Native issues, and particularly Alaska Native issues. He came here in the spring of 2019 and spent time in rural Alaska and was very touched by what he saw. So we made some recommendations, which he converted into an initiative that started about a year ago in November 2019. And it was also kind of about the same time as a White House initiative, which came to be known as Operation Lady Justice. A significant part of both those initiatives was to work with the Alaska Native and Native American communities to come up with plans to coordinate responses, especially for missing persons cases. Now, our approach here, which you're going to hear about a little bit more in depth, which was Ingrid's idea, one of the things that came out of those suggestions to the AG2 was to hire MMIP coordinators for different areas of the country. And we were lucky enough to receive an MMIP coordinator, and ours is Ingrid Cumberledge, who spoke moments ago, and you'll hear from her again. But it was Ingrid's idea that we form a statewide working group to talk about the response, this coordination on missing persons, especially missing persons issue. Now, there's members from the law enforcement side, but most importantly, it contains tribal representatives and groups from other groups from the Alaska Native community, which is absolutely essential. I mean, whatever help we can provide from the law enforcement side, has to be done hand in hand with the Native communities, and that's what we're striving to do. So anyway, thank you again for this opportunity, and I'll turn it over now to Ingrid to continue the presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to just take a moment and briefly introduce myself. I am Aleut and Tlingit, and I am raised in Sandpoint. I guess we were born in Anchorage. My parents are Dick and Edith Jacobson of Sandpoint, and my maternal grandparents are Ivy and John Jacobson, again of Sandpoint. My paternal grandparents are Alfred and Carmel Widmark of Klawock and Juneau. My background that I bring to this position is I've been a teacher for the last 23 years, and then a principal and a tribal court judge for the Chowgantagana tribe of Sandpoint. In that position, I got appointed to be a member of the Tribal Advisory Council for the National Judicial College in the University of Reno, and I held that position for over 20 years, doing tribal court development work with them. And the fun part, I'm also a commercial fisherman of 30 years, and the most important part, a parent of 19 years of 2 wonderful boys. The little bit of background on the MMIP coordinators, as mentioned by U.S. Attorney Schroeder, those came to us from the Attorney General William Barr's initiative, which was announced in November of 2019. There were 11 MMIP coordinators appointed across the United States. The MMIP coordinators are contract employees under the United States Attorney's Office in these districts. Unfortunately, we have one here in Alaska. I'm on slide 4 if you want to join me. And the other states that have them are Arizona, Montana, Oklahoma, Michigan, Utah, Nevada, Minnesota, Oregon, New Mexico, and Washington. As your MMIP coordinator, I'm located here in Anchorage at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I've been here since July of 2020. The first MMIP coordinator came on in November of 2019. And the last one just came on in Washington just within the last month or so. If you go to slide number 5, you'll see a map of these positions. This also has a map of the cold case offices, which I'll be talking about a little bit later. But we are also fortunate to have one here in Anchorage. On the next slide, I want to take a moment and talk about our working group and just say thank you to all those working group members. We've been hard at it since early in the fall of 2020. And when we established this working group, we really wanted to get a broad spectrum across Alaska to represent a statewide perspective, our tribal missing and murdered Indigenous persons focus, our stakeholders, our multidisciplinary providers, and many people that were experienced in MMIP issues. So we have 4 tribal representatives that represent different areas across the state. We have federal, state, municipal, and tribal law enforcement, including the Alaska State Troopers, several municipal law enforcement agencies, including the Anchorage Police Department, as well as 2 VPSO supervisors from different regions and search and rescue representatives. We also have 2 victim services and advocacy representatives that are on there. And I've been working this group really hard. They have been committed since the beginning. We started meeting weekly and then pushed back to bi-weekly. And we've continued the work since we started. And they've brought a lot of great things to the table. So I'm looking forward to you hearing them. I'm hoping that on slide number 8, that Miss Gloria Simeon is on board. And I'm going to just remind you, Gloria, that you need to *6 because I think you're connected by phone. So if you'll *6 on your phone. Gloria is one of our Alaska Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Working Group member, and she is also our tribal member from ONC from the village of Bethel. And she's going to talk about building connections and collaboration to help build safety in Alaska. And Gloria, if you're on, again, *6, and it's yours. And I don't know, can the host tell if you have a phone call on?
I have quite a few numbers. Do you know which phone number it would be?
I don't know which phone number would it be offhand. I can find that. But let me go on, and when we get to the next speaker, I'll look it up. And Gloria, if you can hear me, if you're not able to unmute, I'll give you one more opportunity. Again, you have to *6. But if you can hear me, go ahead. And if not, I'll get you after the next speaker, and I'll text the number into the host, so maybe she can unmute you. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll try. So Gloria, one more time. Okay. We're going to go on to the next little bit of the presentation, and that's me. So when we get to the next speaker, I'll go ahead and get that number for the host and see if we can get Gloria on later in the time. I apologize, Gloria, if you can hear me, and we'll try and get you connected another way. So, the National Missing and Murdered Indigenous Person Initiative, of course, I mentioned already the Attorney General's initiative, which happened in November 22nd of 2019. We also have President Trump's executive order 13898, which happened on November 26, 2019. This established a task force to address the issue of missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. It provided a consultation with tribes regarding the MMIPs, and it developed model protocols. We've now changed those to guidelines to respond to MMIPs based on best practices. The hope was that it would improve investigation and prosecution of MMIP cases, and also that it might improve data collection and use across databases and law enforcement agencies. It established a multi-jurisdictional team to review cold cases, which includes our cold case office here in Anchorage, and it developed and provided public outreach and education to reduce MMIP crime. In doing so, we established Operation Lady Justice, and if you haven't been to that website, I really encourage you to do so. That is at https:// operationladyjustice.usdoj.gov/forward. Again, just type in Operation Lady Justice, it will pop up, and this has information like the consultations. It will have the guidelines that have just recently been approved. I don't believe they're quite up yet, but it is just a good source of information. We also have the Savannah Act, which was kind of the background to all of these other initiatives happening, but was only just recently passed in October of 2020, and again gives some support to this MMIP work. The Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Coordinator in my position was to assist with the development of the national recommended guidelines to respond to and address MMIP cases. It was to consult with tribal communities to create and implement tribal community response plan guides. The coordination of these response and resources, programs, services in MMIP, and to help ensure that our lead law enforcement agencies that were working on these cases were aware of potentially available support and MMIP resources. It also supported missing and murdered Indigenous person data entry and collection, and that work is just beginning. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. Right now, I'd like to introduce Ms. Charlotte Rand to you, one of our Alaska Missing and Murdered Working Group members. She's the Assistant Attorney General and Special Assistant to the Attorney General at the Department of Law. I'm on slide 11 if you want to join me, and she's with the state of Alaska. Ms. Rand?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Charlotte Rand, and I have been serving on this MMIP group with Ingrid and a bunch of others. And I just wanted to say a few quick things about how our work at the Department of Law on human trafficking is sort of paralleling these efforts. So for the last year and a half, we've explicitly dedicated some resources and folks over at the Department of Law to work on human trafficking efforts, from building awareness to developing prosecutorial skills so that we can, as a state or at the state level, more effectively try these cases to juries. We've also had some legislative efforts. So working on the MMIP human trafficking component has really helped us to focus our efforts, and also hopefully we will be able to help them in terms of ongoing efforts to get the word out about this issue. I'll just say a couple different things, a couple different examples of what we're working on. So in terms of outreach and just general awareness building, we're trying to create a more formal relationship between the Department of the airport and the Department of Homeland Security Blue Campaign, which is a campaign that provides resources that are at no cost to different states to develop materials, signs, awareness, PSAs, etc. around trafficking. And that is kind of in the pipeline right now. We are always looking for opportunities to collaborate, and if folks have any ideas about if they want signs up or stuff like that, we're always willing to work with you on that. And I'm also excited to say that through this group, we've been able to connect with ANTHC, and we really look forward to working on some more targeted outreach to Native communities on the issue of trafficking. And so that's sums it up. I will turn it over.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rand. And I want to go back. I've just been notified that Miss Simeon just joined us. And Gloria, you need to *6 your phone to go ahead and speak. And we're going to go ahead and go back to you. So Miss Simeon, of course, was one of our Alaska MMIP members. She, again, is from the ONC tribe of Bethel, and she's going to talk about building connections and collaborations and some other issues with tribal people. Go ahead, Gloria, and again, *6 so that we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I had to call you back on my landline.
Okay, and
Okay,
you're
my
on
name is
slide
Gloria
8.
Simeon. Oh man, yeah, this delay just kind of threw me off. Hoka, Huinga, Alabachuk, Jalislu, Jangak. Japayum Banya, Duhkak, Dutawaluk. Mamkli Chluchmiu. Introducing myself, my name is Gloria Simeon. I'm the daughter of Anita Gertz and the granddaughter of the late Chief Eddie Hoffman. I am from the village, the native village of Bethel, representing my tribe, the Yahut Native Council. I'm very proud and honored to have been part of this group. And as I testified at William Barr's hearing here in our region, outside of the fact that I'm not missing and murdered, I'm every Native woman that has suffered violence, abuse, trauma, substance abuse, and recovery and survival. So with that being said, I have brought that to the table, as well as 10 years of experience being the VPSO coordinator for my region, the AVCP region. We had at one time 33 VPSOs full force back in the 80s and early 90s. And through that, I was able to experience a lot of what happens in the village when there's nothing else. So I thank Brian Schroeder for reminding us that we are on the land of the Dena'ina. And I also thank them for being the village where my people are also residing when it becomes too hard to live out here. And through that recognition of the Dena'ina people as well as the Native people all over the world, it is our tradition to always welcome newcomers to our land, to feed them, to house them, and to always make sure they're safe. This is what we do, and this is how we live. And that's what I want to bring to you as the largest Native village in the state. It is your duty to provide that safety to my people that come to live in your community because they have no other choice. And when we turn to you for help, we need you to take us seriously and to respect the relationships that we have and that we need to develop so that our people are safe when they're away from our land and on the land that isn't their home. Those tribal relationships, Alaska has close to half the tribes in this country residing in our homelands. And those relationships are sacred and need to be nurtured so that when our people come to you for help, or you come back to us needing assistance to help you, that we respect and honor that, and the doors are open both ways. And communication has been an issue every time we turn around, and we've spoken of many ways that we can break down these barriers, ensuring that people who are not from the Indigenous communities understand who our people are. And when they come and they're lost in the city, that they have an understanding of what it's like in the village and where these people come from before they paint them with the same brush. And the other understanding that needs to be clear is, as Brian Schroeder mentioned, we bring so much to the economy and to the life of Anchorage. You celebrate us through our crafts, our art, our celebrations, the AFN. Our people have to come to Anchorage for Medicare, Medicaid travel. We contribute to the hospitality industry, to the cab drivers, to the stores. When we're free to travel, we buy, we spend our money in Anchorage. So we bring more than a lot of times we take back as far as a feeling of trust and security. So those need to be understood, that it's so important that everyone who comes to your town, the largest village of our people, feel safe and know that they can trust the people of this community to understand the sacredness of that obligation. And I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to bring this to your table. And I hope that it brings a more sensitivity and awareness to this whole issue and how we need to work together to overcome barriers rather than putting new barriers in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simeon. I so appreciate you sharing with us some of the work that has been done on some of the issues that she's talking about. We've talked about the need for more orientation and cultural awareness. We've talked about a need for our Anchorage Police Department to have contacts in our tribes. And as we develop our tribal plans, we're hoping that we can provide those to our law enforcement agencies across the state. And to build collaboration between the tribes and law enforcement. We've talked about outreach and education, and I know some of our other members have talked about that as well. And we're working with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium to build that education. And one of the big ones that we've talked about is the need for no wait time, just the education on that there is absolutely no wait time. When somebody goes missing, we need the people that are closest to the incident to call in immediately, to call 911 and get that information going. There's no 24 hours, there's no 48 hours. We just need that information called in as soon as possible. I'm going to continue, and again, I want to say thank you. I really appreciate that input. Let's go to slide number 12. You have an understanding of the jurisdiction, but I just want to reiterate that because it's important to the MMIP process. In the District of Alaska, the jurisdiction, we are a PL 280 state. So that means that the primary jurisdiction resides within our Alaska State Troopers and by extension, our village public safety officers. Primary jurisdiction also resides within our municipal law enforcement, and that includes our Anchorage Police Department. The only tribe that has primary jurisdiction in the state of Alaska is Metlakatla. And then we have our federal law enforcement partners who have jurisdiction over federal crimes. But our federal law partners also have supportive jurisdiction. They can provide resources and law enforcement support at the request of tribal, municipal, and state law enforcement. And then finally, we have our BIA cold case agent who has jurisdiction in Metlakatla, and through collaboration and agreement with tribal, municipal, state, and federal law enforcement. So that's kind of the background of the jurisdiction picture. And online right now, we have Captain Josh Nolder, Lieutenant Jack Carson, and Sergeant Bianca Cross from the municipality of Anchorage Police Department, and some of which are our Alaska Missing and Murdered Indigenous Person Working Group members as well. And I'd like them to go ahead and share. Thank you.
This is Lieutenant Carson, the Anchorage Police, and again, I got Captain Nolder and Sergeant Cross. Captain Nolder's over the whole detective division to include homicide, and Sergeant Cross is our sergeant who's in charge of homicide, and we also cover missing people within homicide. So some of the things we've done is working with the group is we're trying to come up with ways to better do our job, and one of the things that we think would be helpful is to come up with a way to make more people aware when someone's missing. So one of the ideas is when they go into the hospitals and things like that, if the staff there had access to know that the person that they're treating is missing, maybe they could help inform them. Now, we don't want to breach the trust, and we don't want the hospital to breach the trust. So, one of the things is when someone is reported missing, we actually have to have a police officer respond out there and clear them as a missing person as of now. So they wouldn't just secretly call us. What the thought is that they would actually inform the person that they've been reported as missing, because a lot of the people don't realize that they've been reported missing, and then offer to call us and have us come out and clear them from a missing person. And, obviously, if we can get the people that aren't missing but are listed as missing off the list, then it really helps us focus on the list and give services to those that are truly missing, and to be able to identify those people earlier is so crucial to us, especially in the digital age we live in right now, where video and things like that starts disappearing pretty rapidly. So that's one of the things we've been working on, and I know I'm speaking quick. I'm trying to keep it within the 2 minutes here. The second thing that we think would be helpful is we kind of reached out asking for some funding to help with some genetic testing for the unidentified remains. Now, these are not people we believe to be victims of a violent crime. Obviously, we got other funding sources to get DNA testing for that. These are ones that we don't believe are victims of violent crime, but remains that have been found and we haven't been able to identify. And these people are just as important. There's families out there that have a missing family member that they don't know. And one of the worst thoughts is that we may have that person. We just weren't able to identify them. Now with the new advancements in DNA testing, there's testing out there that will allow us to hopefully identify some of these people. Unfortunately, that testing is expensive. It can be upwards of about $5,000 per person or per DNA test that we get done. And this is a lot of what you guys have heard on the news of diving into genealogy and things like that, so they can tell us who this missing person or this unidentified remains may be related to. Then we can then reach out to the family and see if they have anybody in their family that's been reported missing, and help solve some of these cases and bring closure to the families. And that's kind of some of the funding, that we've kind of reached out to some different groups, wondering if they could help us out with. Again, on criminal cases, we can find the funding for that. It's more just for the unidentified remains that we don't believe are the victim of a crime. Any questions?
It doesn't look like we have any questions at this time. Thanks.
remind that I'll be available at the end if we have additional questions. Thank you again to Lieutenant Carson and Sergeant Cross and Captain Noller for being here. I appreciate that. We're going to go back to the Alaska Working Group, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the work has been proceeding. We've identified MMIP concerns and histories from member input. We've also reviewed some of the Operation Lady Justice consultation and some of those shared concerns. In the process of doing this, we focused on developing 3 community action plan models, and that's part of that tribal community response plan. We'll be finishing up these models as we work in the pilot projects with the tribes and also with the working group over the next month. We'll be working on these. We've also identified resources and opportunities to collaborate in MMIP work across the state, identifying missing and murdered Indigenous persons prevention and response opportunities. This has included, as mentioned, working with ANTHC to start working on some messaging and identifying training needs. And this is one of the ones that I want to bring to your attention. Training needs, we're still identifying these up to the national level. You've seen, many of our law enforcement agencies have seen a lot of the training that has come out on MMIP issues. But if there are specific things that would help in any area, please identify those to me so that I can take them back to the group as that list is still being developed. And training, of course, has been happening virtually because of COVID, as has all the working group work, which has really changed our approach to how we would do this, including the tribal community response plans. These are products of Operation Lady Justice, and I'm on slide 15. The work was to develop guidelines to respond to cases of missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives, to assist with governments in developing these tribal community response plans. And with tribes and tribally identified community stakeholders, we were going to put these together. We start this process next week in our first pilot site. And the object is to establish a collaborative MMIP culturally appropriate response with tribal, municipal, state, and federal law enforcement and other stakeholders and partners. Nationally, on the next slide, these pilot projects were identified with 6 missing and murdered Indigenous persons coordinator districts participating in the MMIP Tribal Communities Response Plan pilot projects. U.S. Attorney Schroeder for the District of Alaska was happy to have Alaska join as one of the pilot sites. We also have Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, Oklahoma, and Oregon as part of our pilot project. The hope is that as we go out into these pilot sites, in working with tribes, that we will learn a few lessons and come back with recommendations to make the guides stronger. It is possible that the guides will be revised again before they're brought out to use, and we want to make them really usable for Alaska, kind of around those 3 models, so we can go back into all of our tribes, our 200 plus tribes, and have a solid response in each of them. Right now, I want to turn it over to some of our federal resource partners, so they can talk about some of the things that they bring to the table as we work with MMIP issues. So identifying resources and opportunities to collaborate. I have Ms. Rochelle Lydyke, U.S. Marshal Public Affairs Officer for the United States Marshals in the District of Alaska. Ms. Rochelle?
Yes, good morning. I just wanted to briefly discuss the partnership that we have. We are definitely joining in with the MMIP program and trying to collaborate with all the different agencies and tribal members to utilize our assets best to assist in this program. We are known for our fugitive apprehension and sex offender investigations, which we do continue to use in this aspect. Along with that, the Marshal Service supports the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's mission to protect children from victimization by providing assistance to federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. Since the Marshals partnership with NECMEC began in 2005, the Marshals have helped to recover over 2,100 missing children. We hope to bring those resources that we utilize in these cases over to the MMIP program and also enforce that. We have the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act of 2015 enhanced our ability and our authority to assist the federal, state, and local enforcement with the recovery of missing, endangered, and abducted children, regardless of whether there was a fugitive nexus or a sex offender involved. So we are pleased to be able to bring those assets to the table in this aspect as well. The Marshals were established, we've established a missing child unit to oversee and manage the implementation of this enhanced authority under that act. And upon request, the Marshal Service can assist other law enforcement agencies with the recovery of critically missing children who have gone missing over circumstances that indicate an elevated risk to the child. We can work these types of cases, whether it be family abductions, non-family abductions, endangered runaways, lost children, endangered children, and otherwise missing. We can assist when there is a full extradition warrant for the abductor of or the missing child, or the child is suspected victim of a crime, or if law enforcement indicates an elevated risk to the missing child, and we have the resources available to do so. Some of those resources that we have here in the state of Alaska not only include our Sex Offender Investigations Task Force, which have members from Anchorage Police Department, Alaska State Troopers, Wildlife Troopers. We also have an Alaska Fugitive Task Force, which is part of the Pacific Northwest Violent Offender Task Force with the Marshal Service. We're able to investigate missing and endangered children, sex offender failure to register investigations, fugitive location apprehension in Alaska, nationwide, and internationally. We also can bring to the table in the MMIP program, we have one caravan aircraft that's based in Anchorage. We have an airboat with the ability to maneuver over water, land, and ice, which we actually just got up to Bethel recently. And that is available to the Alaska State Troopers and as well as the Marshal Service who have been trained to operate that boat. We do have a river boat also based in Bethel and 8 snow machines out in Bethel and St. Mary's area, which we all have utilized these with the troopers and the VPSO to go out and enforce sex offender investigations and fugitive apprehensions as well. And we'll continue to use these resources and have them available for the MMIP program. And we look forward to continuing our partnership with the local agencies and local, federal, and state, and utilizing these assets to be dedicated to this mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy U.S. Marshal Leidick. Now I'd like to go continue that discussion with Mr. Lyle Kessler, CDR Chief External Affairs for the United States Coast Guard and the District of Alaska.
Good morning. I'm Lyle Kessler, the External Affairs Officer with the U.S. Coast Guard. I've been stationed here in Juneau for 4.5 years. The first 3 working with our Incident Management Office in the 2 air stations. One of my primary duties was coordinating search and rescue operations throughout Alaska. Previously, I was stationed in Alaska in 2002-2004 on the Acushnet and Ketchikan. In my current job, I work with the Alaska Delegation, the Alaska State Legislature, local and city governments on issues related to the Coast Guard. And Mr. Rob Edwardson, our tribal liaison, is also part of the MMIP work group. And one of his primary duties is guiding our agency in Alaska to improve long-term relationships with tribes and Native organizations. The U.S. Coast Guard is honored to be a cooperating agency in the MMIP work group. Very quickly this morning, I'm just going to go a brief rundown of how the Coast Guard in Alaska might be able to contribute to this effort. The U.S. Coast Guard has a large federal presence in Alaska. The bulk of our permanent presence is in southeast and south central Alaska. However, we operate a deployable model to serve all of Alaska's residents in our primary missions. We operate a fleet of 13 cutters, 44 cutter and station small boats, 13 helicopters, and 5 fixed-wing C-130 aircraft. Our aircraft are based in Sitka and Kodiak, but deploy for 5 months to Cordova, 4 months to Kotzebue, and 2 to 3 months to Cold Bay. Our helicopters deploy. our personnel in Anchorage deployed to conduct inspections throughout the western and mainland Alaska throughout the spring, summer, and fall. And our cutters, our major cutters deploy up to the Bering Sea and all around. And our cutters here in Southeast and South Central deploy and patrol the coast along those areas as well. As we continue to develop within the MMI work group, we will continue to look for more ways to support, collaborate, and integrate. Initially, I see the Coast Guard being able to support through the resources we have and where we deploy to. We have provisions that allow us to support other federal, state, and local agencies in certain circumstances with those resources. For example, if an MIP partner or Alaska State Trooper needed transportation from Cosby to a remote village while we had a helicopter deployed there, we could likely make that happen. Additionally, we conduct outreach to villages prior to their travel, our planned inspections and deployments, and we could possibly be an arm for this group to reinforce our message within those villages. Additionally, as at-sea law enforcement is one of our primary missions, if we needed help, if someone needed help apprehending a fugitive that was suspected to be on board a ship, we would definitely be all in for that as well. That about wraps it up for what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, CDR Chief Kessler. As you can see, our resource partners are very strong, and there are numerous other work members, but we just wanted to give you a taste of some of the resources that have come to the table in this discussion. If you go to slide 19, I wanted to give you a little bit more information about the cold case office. The BIA cold case investigator in Anchorage was announced by the White House, and it opened in August of 2020. This is the first BIA investigator in Alaska. He is a special agent. He's licensed, experienced as an investigator, and his focus is on missing and murdered Alaska Natives and American Indian cold cases in Alaska. He's working with our local Anchorage Police Department and the Alaska State Troopers. And he is also an active member of our Alaska Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Working Group. If you go to slide 20, I'll give you a little background to the pilot projects that are starting next week. The goal of these pilot projects, again, is to develop those tribal community response plans we've been talking about. The focus of them is to work with the working group and the pilot's sites to develop our community with no law enforcement plan, our community with limited law enforcement, including VPSOs and TPOs and other police arrangements in tribal communities, and third, our hub communities which may have law enforcement, which is municipal, and may also have state law enforcement, Alaska State Troopers in those communities. So those are the three plans. Our four pilot sites represent communities from Southwest, the interior, Bristol Bay, and Southeast. And they run about a week apiece. So the Southwest site begins next week, and we end with the Southeast site in the first week in February. And then we'll be reporting out nationally on the work accomplished at that point the following week. It may be that the work will not be completed at that point, but the work up to that point will be reported out, and then we will continue the work until we've got community response plans in each of those sites. Our hope is that those plans will establish collaborative response from the tribal governments, law enforcement, and other partners and stakeholders to respond to emergent cases of missing and murdered Indigenous persons. And we want those response plans to be culturally appropriate. In each of the plans, the tribal community response plans will consider up to 4 of the guidelines that were published by Operation Lady Justice in December. The areas are community outreach, so we'll be using those resources that are readily available in the communities and that service the communities. There's also a victim services guideline, a law enforcement guideline, and a media and public communications guideline, as this is one of the areas that we hear a lot. As these cases occur, the community is wanting more communication. They want to know that work is being done, and that there is something being done on their missing loved one. If you go to slide number 22, some of the additional work with the MMIP is again that collaboration. We are working on collaboration across all those agencies and services across Alaska and with our tribes. And then in addition to that, we're meeting weekly with the national MMIP coordinators to see what's going on around the nation and making sure that we are making use of all the best practices. We are working to seek input on the national guidelines and best practices, and a lot of that work is happening in the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Work Group. In that regard, we're starting a discussion with the regions to go out to have a consultation and listening session starting towards the end of February and into March and April, so that we can get tribal input from all of our tribes as well into those guidelines and into the pilot projects that we will have completed by then. We also support the MMIP efforts throughout the state of Alaska, including statewide advocacy groups. For example, our statewide MMIW advocacy and victim services groups that are already working on these important issues. We engage regularly with the Alaska State Troopers and our municipal police force, including the Anchorage Police Department, on the effective utilization of missing person alerts, database agencies, the Alaska Missing Clearinghouses, and our national databases, and the AMBER and other alerts, of which we have AMBER and Silver in the state of Alaska. If you go to the data goals, I'll give you just a brief introduction to the data. I have to say this work is just beginning. That's on slide 23. As the Operation Lady Justice Committee has just come together with data and is starting that discussion. In that discussion, we're looking for things like common language and definitions, and that's starting to come together. Also, we've had a discussion of the need for common identifiers and databases. So identifying our Alaska Natives when we can and our American Indians when we can, and making sure that that happens in all databases. This is being done with communication with our federal law enforcement and other partners. We've communicated with our tribes and tribal-based data organizations in the state, and we've encouraged them to share their data so that we can do a comparison of what's available in our state database and our national databases. In addition to that, there's a national effort that's starting to happen as well. The Department of Justice has studies going forward. The Department of Health and Human Services have studies going forward on what the history of missing and murdered Indigenous persons has been over the last 10 to 20 years. And this is additional reports beyond just the annual reporting of crime that happens. Our law enforcement state file systems are for case files not designed to function as statistical tracking systems. So this is one of the issues that we've been struggling just a little bit. As we look at some of our federal databases, they're not easy to pull out and analyze by specific category in some cases. So we're working on a discussion of that at the working group. And then finally, our Alaska State Clearinghouse has been amazing. We've done a lot of work with them on the working group. They're working with your Anchorage Police Department on the issue of working with the health department at ANTHC to clear those missing persons, as mentioned by Carson. The deal with them, though, is in order for it to click and work up to the national level, we need to make sure that those reports are made as soon as possible to the Alaska State Troopers, and that we can get it into that clearinghouse as soon as possible. And then also that law enforcement and agencies that are working on these issues check the database often, because that is publicly listed. And so making sure that the data has been entered in is correct to meet those needs. If you go to slide 24, I just want to review some of the work that's happening in Anchorage as we're talking to you here in Anchorage. We are supporting collaboration with ANTHC and the Anchorage Police Department to reduce the number of missing persons on the Alaska Clearinghouse missing person list. We plan and are attempting to develop good tribal contact for the Anchorage Police Department to reach out to villages on behalf of people affected by MMIP concerns, and the reverse of that also, so that tribes can reach back to the Anchorage Police Department when they have issues of concern regarding missing and murdered Indigenous persons. We're working with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and the Alaska Police Department, the Alaska State Troopers, and other working group members on prevention, provider identification of MMIP issues, and response training and educational outreach. We're also working with the Alaska MMIP Working Group on education and outreach on the issue, particularly of call 911 immediately. If there's one message that I could leave you with, I think that's the biggest message. If we can build trust and relationships so that all our people across Alaska are calling 911 as soon as they believe there's a missing person, so that we can get a response as quickly as possible. That is the message that I want to be heard the loudest. When someone is suspected of missing, there is no wait time. My final slide, Gunaschish, Kagasakun, Koyana, thank you. And I'm here and available for you if you have any questions. If I don't have the information, I will tell you that, and I will tell you that I will try and get it for you. But I appreciate you taking the time and having us come and visit with you. You can see we have a lot of dedicated people to this issue. So thank you again. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer.
Wonderful. Well, Ingrid, just from me, I just want to extend a huge thank you to you and your entire team that was here today for such a wonderful and comprehensive report. It gives me a lot of hope that this work is going on, and that and you have so many competent people involved in it. So we do have a question for you, Miss Kennedy. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ingrid, thank you so much. I do appreciate you doing all this work to get everybody together and bring us this presentation. I was quite impressed about all the connections, though, and just how many different organizations are working with you and collaborating. And certainly that's good to know. And obviously for something as complicated and such a big charge as this, I can see where you would need a lot of people, to really collaborate and make some good things happen. So with that said, it sounds like with these connections, these new connections, this idea of really focusing on this, what can you tell me at this point about the kinds of successes that you've seen at this point? What's getting better? What are we really making progress on? And what is really being most helpful in this effort toward finding some of these maybe missing persons, but at the same time also finding the people that committed the murders? So what kind of progress are you seeing? Thank you.
Well, initially, I have to say I can't give you case information where some progress has been made, but I can tell you that the background and the work that's being done to prepare for that has been tremendous. The relationships and belief and trust in each other to be able to do the work together was the #1 issue that was brought to the table, both in the Operation Lady Justice consultations and in my working group from day one. And next week, I'm sitting down with my first pilot site community, and they have already reached out to the Alaska State Troopers on their site and to the municipal police officers, and they're sitting down with us. And so just that alone, to have those discussions as you start having those community response plans, is tremendous. The effort that the Anchorage Police Department is doing to clear people that are possibly alive but missing in Anchorage, and working with the health department to identify when they present in admissions in the hospital and in that these people are alive is great. I think that you're going to see a lot more improvement as this relationship develops and grows over the few years. But beyond that, I can't tell you any immediate changes, other than agencies are working together. And when we have had missing persons, their agencies are reaching out to each other and saying, "What resources do you have?" And they're coming and bringing those resources to the table.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it looks like, you've done a lot to basically provide the groundwork by which some really good things can come out, and things will be so much more, well, you'll definitely have a lot of things to claim are really successful. But I absolutely appreciate, the effort that's going forward and the attention that's being given this right now, and particularly from all levels. I mean, whether it's here locally or from the state or from the feds. So great collaborative effort, and I think it will have some really positive things. Looks very promising, so I definitely appreciate that. Thanks again for all your work and putting this together for us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. Are there any other questions?
I don't see any other questions at this point. I would just add a few things before we close this part of our presentation. Again, thank you so much to you and all of the speakers that came forward today. I would just let you know that I do believe that there's a lot of support for this work on this body. So just please leave this meeting knowing that you have a lot of support. And I think that one of the big takeaways here is really building open and consistent communication. And so Crystal and I are co-chairs of this committee, and we would love to be at least one of your points of contact to make sure that we have consistent and open communication about the work that you're doing. And then the final thing is that there's anything that the Assembly can do in terms of action to support your work. So if through your work, if there are things that we as a body can do, I would really encourage you to come forward and share that with us, and for us to consider that action in this committee and then bring it to the larger body. So again, thank you for your time and for your presentation.
Thank you, and I will. I've written down both of those, and I will get back to you if there's any issues, and vice versa. You have my contact information, as do the members of your committee. So if there are issues or questions that you need to get back to me, please feel free to do that.
I will. And Ingrid, I still think fondly of traveling to Sandpoint and seeing you the work you did in schools was amazing, and I'm so proud that you're doing this work now, and so it's good to see you again as well. So
it's good to see you again as well. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the co-chairs in the committee. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. With no questions I do want to try to make sure we have a little bit of time at the end for public comment. I want to make sure we get that in. But the next item that we added to the agenda, Member Kennedy and I wanted to open a brief conversation about a topic that we've been discussing, and wanted to create some space for the members of this committee to discuss as well. And I'll just open it by saying that the postponement of the action to put APD technology / body cameras on the ballot was an effort from my perspective to look to see if we could find that funding internally. And there were some concerns, I think, at least, and I'll just speak for myself, about whether putting that out as a ballot item was the right direction, both because of the impact that it would have on the taxpayer, and also because this felt like such a priority for us as an administration and as a body. And we've heard from APD that is certainly a high priority for them in terms of the technology. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up, and I would really appreciate any feedback from the members, is if the administration were able to find and shift funding in order to find funding for this internally, I guess I'd like to hear it from members if members would consider that as an option, as opposed to putting it out for a vote. We've had conversations with the administration. We've also looked at possible areas where we can cut and change funding. And so I wanted to just open that up, and because this is really the only forum that we would have prior to the next meeting where we can discuss it. So I'd really love to hear members of the body share their thoughts on that. And I see Ms. Zalatel. Yes, please share.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm hoping that there's a proposal to consider. I guess it's a little bit hard to consider without a proposal. One of my concerns about a technology funding piece is a one-time may not lend fidelity to that technology funding. We know technology requires upgrades and, kind of an ongoing, you kind of have to keep it moving along. It's kind of a living thing. And so I would definitely want to see whatever the proposal might be so we can evaluate that. I know we're running up against some deadlines, so I'm not necessarily opposed to looking at it in that way, but I just can't give more. But that fidelity piece is really my largest concern.
Good. That's very helpful. Thank you. And Ms. Kennedy, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My response to that is absolutely, this is going to be an ongoing cost. This isn't about just trying to find some money to start something. This is going to be something that has to be sustained. And we believe, though, that those of us that have been talking about it believe that that can be done within the general fund without increasing taxes or asking the voters to improve or to approve a new tax levy. Excuse me. So we're well aware of the fact that this has to be sustainable, and that is exactly what the police department wants to do. Is they want to put this into basically a lease program. So this isn't really a bond, as a usual bond. It's not just a one-time attempt to improve the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure of APD. It's meant to be long-term, and that's why it would definitely be, well, at this point, I believe it would be a lease program that would provide all of that. So that said, I know I have an ordinance being drafted by Dean right now. But we also understand that the administration could potentially be looking at something that they could come up with. So it's possible that we would have two different proposals to look at here shortly. So that is definitely the plan, to bring something on paper so everybody can look at numbers and get a bigger and better picture of what we're talking about. So Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thanks. And again, my intention of this was just to kind of get a sense of where folks are at to see about moving forward. So that's really helpful. Mr. Weddleton, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. And actually just a couple comments, and I'll throw them out there, and I've done no more work on them besides had them pop in my head. And one is, the thought of funding it through the normal budget. Certainly you just cut something else, but, we've got the new contract for the police coming up, and that adds several million a year to our budget just to cover the salary increases and so on. So that's going to, we would increase that pressure by adding body cams. But something that had popped into my head is we can increase the marijuana tax by 2%, I think, no more than every couple of years or something. And we rejected doing that a couple of years ago. So I think pretty soon another opportunity to do that would come up. And that 2%, I think, is probably pretty close to what the cost of body cams would be. So it might be something we could do, and that doesn't have to go to a vote to increase it, the marijuana tax 2%, not a popular vote, but just amongst ourselves. So that alternative may be out there, and I have not investigated it further than that statement. Thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, my question was answered, but to note what John just said, I think that if I'm not mistaken, I think we do have to go back to a vote of the people, or perhaps, you know what, I need to think about that more. I thought that we were, by the language of the ballot initiative, we had a certain time frame in which to raise it up to 7%, but then thereafter we had to go back to a vote of the people, but I could be mistaken about that. At any rate, I don't think, if we're trying to have something, if the question is whether we put something on the ballot or not put on the ballot, then we only have until the end of this month to do it. And so a proposal has to be put on the addendum so that there can be a public hearing on the second meeting. So, I mean, I just think we're sort of getting down to the wire here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I agree. Thanks so much. And it looks like Mr. Rivera. Yes, would you like to share?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think along with several of my colleagues have been waiting for a proposal before we really delve into this conversation, because I think without something in front of us, it's a little bit difficult to commit to whether I would want to use general fund dollars or not. If you're trying to cut the library, heck no. So it just depends on the proposal you put in front of us. So when those proposals are dropped, I will schedule a work session. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, those look like all of the questions and comments. I appreciate the feedback on that. That was extremely helpful. And with that, I think we're going to try to use the remaining time for audience participation. And so here's how this will go. We'll give 3 minutes, and we'll sort of do it a first come, first serve. Remember, if you're on the phone, you have to use star 69? And so who would like to begin with?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. If you could please state your name for the record, please.
Okay. I'll start my timer. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. There appears to be some confusion among some assembly members, and I'm listening to the conversation you had dealing with body cameras and the hearing that you had previously on it. The hearing that you had on body cameras resulted in a situation of delay to take action in order to see about other funds without having to go to the public for to vote on the issue. And the note, there was also a time situation of when you can take it to the ballot. And what I'm hearing from Assemblymember Kennedy, that there is legislation she's proposing, which I don't question her right to do, but when is the public going to see it? Is this going to be, like I heard the words in this conversation toward the end, an addendum to the agenda on a Friday and a public hearing on that? Is this an S version of this thing, an S1 version? Is this giving the public a fair chance to have input? Remember, this is that those who testified before, if you got new legislation coming in, an addendum and S versions or whatever, you need to give a fair chance to the public to speak on that new substantial change. And also the scenario is that I agree that this thing should not be on the ballot. It's a delay tactic, clear as it can be, because what happens if the voters say no to this thing, and the national protest out there in the country has been keyed on to the need to deal with body cameras. And I'll close with my comment and wish you all the best and Happy New Year with approximately 1 minute to spare. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Haberman. Would anybody else like to speak? Just as a reminder, it's star 69. I'll just give it 1 more minute here if anyone else from the public would like to.
It's star 6. Excuse me, star 6, not star 69.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I thought I had it wrong. Star 6. Thanks. All right. Anybody else from the public who would like to share? It's star 6 to unmute your phone. All right. With that, are there any other items before we adjourn the meeting that the members would like to discuss? Seeing none, thank you all for your time today. I appreciate it. Good discussion, good content. I will adjourn this meeting at 12:23 p.m. Thank you all.